are allowed to enter the morgue. So other medical staff began cleaning up the bodies. The captain angrily declared he couldn't understand how a fire could start in a room filled with corpses. Mr. Wei examined one of the bodies and noticed a ring on its finger, leading him to suspect it might be one of the night shift workers. Then an idea struck him, and he asked if there were more bodies. One of the researchers replied that there were no others. Mr. Wei then turned pale and muttered that it was impossible. The captain demanded to know what the problem was. Mr. Wei asked for all executives to be gathered immediately as the situation was extremely serious. At the meeting, everyone was shocked to learn that the bodies of the research director and the security guard had disappeared. The captain was furious. No one could understand how this happened because corpses cannot walk on their own. He demanded that Mr. Wei confirm his belief. Mr. Wei replied that he had checked everything numerous times, but still hadn't been able to find the bodies. He added that chemicals in the morgue could indeed cause a fire, but not as severe. Then everyone came to the conclusion that someone had deliberately set the fire. Speculation began about who could have done it. One of the men suggested that there might be an unknown alien on board. Out of fear, the other man yelled at him for saying such things. He defended himself, saying he was simply stating a theory and there was no reason to react so violently. Mr. Wei intervened and emphasized that the main problem now was that the lead researcher's body had disappeared. Moreover, they are already facing a meeting with pirates at CO8, and this creates an even more serious threat. The captain stated that the body must be found at any cost and suggested first identifying the circle of suspects. Then the captain swore loudly, causing everyone present to flinch. He shouted, demanding that everyone cooperate to the utmost of their ability if they were even slightly afraid of the noble capital's revenge. After these words, a heavy silence reigned in the room, but he asked the head of the crisis management team if he had contacted the pirates. He replied that he had done so immediately after the meeting ended. The captain ordered them not to tell them what had happened and simply to inform them that the body would be handed over as planned. The crisis team leader inquired about the safety of this. The captain explained that things would be much worse if the body was found, but they didn't know what to do with it. So, as long as they found it before encountering the pirates, everything should be fine. The captain then grabbed the head of security by the shoulder and asked if he understood him. He declared that he had to find out who was behind the incident. The security chief replied that he was already doing everything possible, but the captain abruptly declared that it wasn't enough. The captain gave him permission to check every crew member on board and find the culprit, handing over to him all powers related to this investigation. The security chief assured them he would definitely find the criminal. Meanwhile, the amorphous figure watched them through the vent above. He was pleased. Everything was unfolding exactly as he had hoped. The fire helped cover his tracks and confuse his enemies. He mixed chemicals in the morgue to cause a fire. No one would have thought it was an alien being. After mixing the drugs and reagents into a toxic mixture, he added a few drops of his acidic blood. In the end, everything worked. The bodies also burned. However, he didn't expect people to talk about the possible presence of an alien. Moreover, it turned out they were about to meet space criminals. He mentally noted that the captain seemed to have completely lost his mind. He decided to remember the crisis team leader who had proposed the idea, as he might have connections to the pirates. The pirates are made up of different races, meaning the amorphous being could acquire a variety of genes from them. However, their raid would reduce the number of genetic entities that could be recovered by the exploration ship. He decided to make a final decision. After, he saw the pirates themselves, and then he noticed one person. It was the head of the supply department, the very one who had denied the alien's presence. The man looked noticeably nervous. Aisha, he looked around anxiously. Ode. Then he placed his palm on the door panel to scan. After that, he entered the cargo bay. Amorph understood that this man had no need to sneak in here, since he was the one responsible for this section, so he was wary of why he was looking around so carefully. He began to wonder why the man was acting so suspiciously. The human footprints ended right at one of the containers. This container had a higher level of security than the others, and its walls were so thick that even the amorphous supersense did not allow one to look inside. This immediately piqued his curiosity. It seemed like there was something really important stored inside. His initial target had been the medical team leader, but he now changed his mind. The supply chief would be his new target. Meanwhile, the man slammed his cup on the table and exclaimed how good the drink was. His subordinate gently suggested he stop drinking. The supply chief's mind was filled with complaints about how hard life had been lately. He regretted getting involved with the cult black marketeer. He'd been drawn to the fact that the goods had been found among ancient remains, and he'd figured he could sell them for a fortune. He'd managed to negotiate a deal and smuggle the cargo onto the ship, but the day he'd gotten drunk, one of the eggs had hatched. Now he regretted not having properly sealed the container. He couldn't tell anyone about this. He knew that the captain would go crazy and kill him if he found out the truth. He shouted angrily that it was all the drink's fault. The bartender, already tired of him, announced the establishment was closing. The man began begging for one last glass, and the bartender reluctantly agreed. The drunk staggered on his feet and loudly declared that the real problem was alcohol. Suddenly, he noticed something that made him shudder sharply. He turned around and asked who was there, but the corridor was completely empty. This made him nervous. After a moment, irritation took over, but then he heard several quiet clicking sounds. Looking back, he noticed a strange creature that was quickly slipping away. This sight filled him with real horror, and he started to run. He cursed and almost cried. Running was all his might. Running to the door, he hastily entered the access code. When the door opened, he practically fell inside. Losing his balance, he collapsed to the floor. Gathering his strength, he decided to make an urgent call. But he turned pale when he heard the sound of an electronic signal behind him. Excitation. He was afraid to even turn around. At that moment, the door slowly opened. The alien creature slowly crawled inside. The man trembled in horror upon seeing it. The creature came very close. The amorph seemed to thank fate for the new prey, opened its mouth wide, and soon a loud crunch was heard. Getting rid of the supply chief turned out to be very easy, because his way of life was extremely predictable. This man spent most of his time in the bar and seemed to be overpaid for his work. Amorph even thought that the captain should thank him, since he had rid the ship of those who were only wasting time and resources. He began to rummage through the cluttered room and mentally resented how dirty it was, as if the owner had never cleaned anything in his life. He needed an identification card. Suddenly he noticed a poster of a woman in a bikini. The girl looked very attractive, but the amorphous creature felt absolutely nothing, perhaps because of the creature he had now become. The pole. He picked up a folder from the table and an access card fell out of it. He was delighted to see her. Now he had both a hand and a map, everything he needed for access. Before leaving, he decided to clean up the mess. He finished eating the man's body, though he noted that the meat tasted unpleasant and smelled strongly of alcohol. After some time, the amorphous creature approached the container. He inserted the access card and placed his severed hand on the scanner. The container slowly began to open. Inside were capsules containing unknown creatures. But inside it was cold, like a freezer. It looked like this man was involved in smuggling. Suddenly, the amorphous creature noticed something strange. There were several amorphous eggs inside. He even doubted they were real. One of the eggs was empty, and he wondered if he himself had come from it. Then the amorphous one realized that this man was trying to smuggle him in. In the game, amorphs usually begin their existence not on a spaceship, but in an unknown archaeological complex. He doesn't know what exactly happened along the way, but it seems the previous owner of this body hatched from the container, climbed outside, and soon died of exhaustion. Only after that did his consciousness end up in this body. Now it became clear why he liked the taste of cockroaches so much. His body was acting on pure survival instinct. These thoughts evoked strange feelings in him. He bowed before the empty eggshell and silently prayed for the body's former owner. Having paid his respects, he decided to act as a true amorphous being should. He grabbed the remaining eggs and began to eat them. He ate all the unhatched eggs, but unfortunately the system message never appeared. However, this did not upset him. There were still many creatures around that he could feed on. Loud sounds of chomping and crunching echoed throughout the room. Opening the system window, he was pleased to see that he only had 2 stats left to complete the physical enhancement type. To be honest, he was disappointed when he ate Kisaragi. Instead of psychic power, he received a useless organ of superpowers. But the supply chief still gave him a valuable gift, a powerful stat he wouldn't have been able to obtain until much later in the game. This ability allowed him to effectively kill crew members, meaning he could act much more boldly. There was very little time left before the ship encountered the space dogs. He didn't know how dangerous they were, so he had to become stronger as quickly as possible. He was captivated by the thought of collecting new genetic entities, especially considering that no one would hear the cries of these creatures. Their pitiful cries would be lost in the black abyss of space along with the entire research ship and its crew. Meanwhile, on the landing pad of the Megacobe research ship, the mechanic called Scott to eat. Scott replied that he would be there soon. The man asked how much longer he had to work. Scott said he'd probably be working until late tonight. Both of them groaned in displeasure at this thought. The conversation gradually turned to the recent maintenance order. They were ordered to inspect all ships, even though no combat was expected. The man didn't like discussing work during dinner, but Scott insisted the situation seemed odd and worth considering. Scott said he'd heard a rumor that they were preparing to catch a metal gremlin. Fincher replied that if they actually encountered one, they wouldn't have a chance. Scott countered that the metal gremlin was already on board. Fincher was surprised to hear this. Scott asked if he'd noticed a strange smell in the air lately. He said it was exactly what a metal gremlin smelled like. He added that one of the kitchen staff had been talking about people disappearing one after another lately. Fincher dismissed these as mere silly rumors. A man in glasses joined the conversation and said he'd heard the supply chief was missing. Because of this, the cargo bay manager had been promoted and temporarily taken over his position. Scott emphasized to Fincher that his suspicions were not unfounded. Fincher remarked that even if people were indeed disappearing, it was strange that management wasn't doing anything. The bespectacled man replied that management was simply covering up the situation to avoid panic. Scott reiterated that it was all connected to the metal gremlin. Fincher asked what this had to do with the ship's maintenance. No one knew. All the rumors revolved around the disappearances. Scott suggested the disappearances might be related to some kind of disciplinary action. This only further soured Fincher's mood. He abruptly declared that they were talking complete nonsense. It was already dark, but one ship was still brightly lit. Someone asked Scott if he wanted something to eat. He replied that he'd prefer a strong compound alcoholic drink if he could find one. He complained that he might not be able to finish all the work that night. He continued servicing the ship until Cameron called him. Scott said he was busy, but Cameron insisted, saying it would only take a second. When Cameron called him again, Scott became irritated and even considered hitting Cameron on the head if it turned out to be a trivial matter. He crawled out from under the ship, but immediately became flustered. He looked around, not understanding where Cameron had disappeared to. Cameron's voice came from the maintenance room. Cameron called him inside. Scott asked him what he was doing in the dark. He replied that he was looking for something and asked for help. Scott sighed heavily and went inside. He turned on the flashlight, and at that moment he smelled a strange metallic smell in the air. He asked where he was. The answer was that he was nearby. Scott slipped on the dumbbells and fell forward, hitting the floor hard. He hit his head hard when he fell. In a moment, he realized that something was wrong. Even with a flashlight, he could barely see anything in the darkness, which made him wonder why Cameron was working in complete darkness. Rumors of people disappearing one after another came back to him, and he thought again about the metal gremlin. He heard footsteps behind him and called Cameron's name. Something was slowly approaching him, but he continued to call out to Cameron. Suddenly, the amorphous thing grabbed him. The creature appeared right in front of him and said a greeting. Scott screamed at the top of his lungs, followed by a loud crunch. The amorphous' skill imitation proved quite useful. Meanwhile, Fincher called Scott to say that he had brought compound alcohol, but soon became confused, noticing that Scott was nowhere to be found. He knew that Scott never left his place until he finished work. Suddenly, he heard Scott's voice, who said that he was in the service room. Fincher headed there and asked him what he was doing there. Scott replied that he was looking for something. Fincher wondered why he was working in the dark. Scott called him inside and asked him to help move something. Fincher entered. He was about to say something when he noticed a flashlight lying on the floor. He bent down to pick it up. At that moment, blood began to drip from the ceiling. He was surprised and looked at his palm. Only then did he realize that it was indeed blood. It scared him, and then he saw Scott's dead, creepy face. After 80, the amorphous figure hung from above, holding Scott's head and speaking in his voice. The sight was truly terrifying. Fincher screamed at the top of his lungs, but soon shared the same fate as Scott. While the amorphous creature was calmly devouring its prey, it noted that it was good at luring others. His ability to imitate made this especially convenient. Among the creatures the supply chief attempted to smuggle onto the ship was a larva called the red worm. It's a massive worm found only on desert planets and capable of mimicking the voices of other creatures. It is believed that this ability evolved for effective hunting in harsh conditions. Amorph was glad that he had obtained the genetic essence of the redworm larva, although he noted that its effect was still weaker than the original. He can only imitate the voice of the last creature he ate. Nevertheless, it's still a very useful ability. The next day, he decided to eat someone from the kitchen. He already knew the name of one person, Pierre. He wasn't particularly close to Fincher, but that didn't matter. Amorph decided that Pierre would be his dinner tomorrow. Then he remembered the bubble amoeba and wondered if it was alright. Calling it just a bubble amoeba all the time is awkward, so he decided to label it as number 26. Before returning to his nest, he decided to visit her. Suddenly he heard number 26 greet him. He didn't expect that the organ of superpowers would have such a function. It turns out that it allows communication with beings that transmit thoughts through special waves. Per PSL. He decided to respond with a greeting. Number 26 said he was hungry and asked for food. Amorph noticed that number 26's vocabulary had become much richer. This made him wonder if sonium had any properties he wasn't yet aware of. Amorph apologized and explained that giving him food would be difficult. Number 26 asked what difficult meant. Amorph replied that this meant he couldn't give it to him. Number 26 made sad sounds. Amorph knew it was disappointing, but the risk was too great. After the research director's disappearance, security was raised to maximum. Even the ventilation duct above the laboratory was under surveillance, so the amorphous creature could no longer bring number 26 calorie bars. All he could do was talk to him occasionally. He said it was time for him to leave, and number 26 said goodbye to him. Amorph wished him luck. He thought he could help number 26 once he evolved to the juvenile stage, but the problem was that fulfilling the evolutionary requirements was extremely difficult. To advance to the next stage, you must kill 10 intelligent beings from 2 different species and obtain their genetic essence. There were only humans on the ship, so reaching the juvenile stage was impossible here. Of course, there were still pirates, but he didn't know what would happen to them. He activated his super sense and noticed the head of crisis management talking to someone, ordering them to report to CO8 upon arrival. Amorph didn't understand who exactly he was talking to. The crisis team leader said everything was going exactly according to plan, but suddenly he visibly shuddered when he learned that an order had come from his family. He addressed the person on the line as Sir. He then reported that Kisaragi had been eliminated and the ship would arrive at CO8 as planned. He added that all of Captain Yusun's orders were recorded. The crisis team leader continued that he was doing everything for the family, but then corrected himself and said that he was only following Yanwu Yujin's orders. For this, the man was ready to take any risk. It seemed there really was a traitor on the ship. Amorph recalled that it was this man who had convinced the captain to give those orders, but now it was clear the crisis manager was plotting something far more serious. Amorph decided to keep a close eye on him to see if it would be of any use. Meanwhile, the captain was furious and asked the head of security what he was doing. The head of security apologized, but the captain did not accept it, because in 2 days they had to meet with the pirates, and they still had not the slightest solution to the problem. The head of security explained that they had already increased the number of cameras and guards, but it hadn't produced any results. The captain then turned to the navigation team. He asked how many people on the ship were listed as missing. He was told that there were already 8. The captain was indignant at why the criminal hadn't been caught yet, given that 7 more people had disappeared since the first death. He sharply asked if they themselves were part of the problem. They denied it. Amorph chuckled softly, watching them from his hiding place. They don't even notice who they're looking for. He's literally right under their noses. One of those present stated that the security service was telling the truth. It was the head of crisis management. The captain asked what he meant. He replied that he had checked everything, and that security had indeed done everything possible. These words only angered the captain even more, as it looked like he was trying to cover for the guards, even though the culprit had never been found. The crisis team leader raised his voice, causing the captain to flinch slightly. He explained that what he meant was that if the criminal was a human, it was unlikely that a human would be able to hide so well. He added that rumors were circulating on the ship about a metallic gremlin, and that perhaps there was an unknown creature on board that was attacking people. Amorphous began to sweat. The situation had suddenly taken a dangerous turn. One of the men interrupted him and reminded him that the ship's AI had previously been used in combat operations. Therefore, if any creature had been wandering around the ship, the system would have detected it long ago. The crisis manager acknowledged the AI's capabilities. However, he then told about a container belonging to the supply chief. All the freezers there were empty. He asked the question, where did all these creatures disappear to? And then the most unpleasant scenario, which the amorphous one feared most, began to come true. The captain asked, if there really is a creature on the ship, then where could it be hiding and why has no one noticed it yet? The crisis team leader replied that there was one location that hadn't been checked yet. He then pointed to it. He pointed to the ventilation shafts. He explained that the ventilation system runs through the entire ship, so the creature is probably about 1 meter in size to move freely through these channels. One of the humans objected that a creature of that size was too small to kill people. Another replied that the metal gremlin was only about 80 centimeters long, yet capable of destroying an entire ship. Amorph remembered the man's name, Arnold. He even regretted not having gotten rid of him earlier, even though it would have been risky. People began to realize that if the crisis team leader's words were true, they were in grave danger, especially if the creature had already consumed the lead researcher's body. One of them suggested capturing it alive and handing it over to the noble capital. Another supported this idea, stating that the noble capital would likely relent when they learned that Kisaragi had been eaten by some creature. Then someone brought up the pirates. The same person replied that they would have to fight them if nothing remained of the body. He added that to win, they first need to restore order inside, so first of all they need to deal with the monster to ensure the safety of the crew. ODPA. The captain asked the crisis team leader how many soldiers would be needed. He replied that he would take 6 from Squad 8 and go check the ventilation ducts. Captain gave permission. Hearing this, the amorphous creature quickly slipped away. Panicked. He panicked slightly. He knew it was only a matter of time before this moment would arrive. Arnold, the head of the crisis team, will likely install a security system in the ventilation, meaning the amorphous will no longer be able to use those passages. If he leaves his nest, he'll have nowhere to go, the corridors are lined with chambers, and the ventilation will now become a trap too. It's time to make an important decision. He wondered whether to run or stay and fight. He replayed in his mind what Arnold had said earlier, that the criminal is not a man, that it could be hiding in ventilation ducts throughout the ship, and that this creature must be captured alive and handed over to the noble capital. DC. These memories only fueled the amorphous rage. Polarasted versus. He felt insulted, as if he were being treated as some kind of wild animal. Even if his limbs are torn off, he will still be able to bite people with his teeth. He had finally decided to fight. He vowed to show them that trying to capture the amorphous creature on a spaceship with such a small number of soldiers was sheer folly. He intended to make them experience true hell in the middle of space. Amorph pressed his fingers to the surface of the ship and began to create a network of connections throughout the core. His auxiliary organs delved into the ship's structure and began to analyze it. This gave him information about the structure of the entire research ship, as well as the location and movements of enemies. If we compare the spaceship to an organism floating in the depths of space, then it was only a parasite in the brain of this inorganic creature. Now he knew everything that happened on the ship almost as well as its owners. Captain Yusung and the unit leaders gathered on the bridge. Judging by Arnold's presence, this was where they intended to direct the operation. Amorph also sensed the movement of armed soldiers. As expected, the forces were divided and moving from 2 different directions. The basic plan was already roughly prepared, and now he decided to refine the details depending on the enemy's weapons and actions. Amorph smiled and decided to go out to meet his guests. Soldiers from Group A1 reported the start of the operation. They received a response from the control center. Then the B1 group also reported their readiness. Control warned the B1 to check communications because the signal was unstable. The soldiers' movements were monitored on a large screen in the control room. Control ordered that any suspicious findings be reported immediately. Arnold mused that it was this creature that had probably killed Kisaragi. According to the plan, he was supposed to do it himself. But now he had no intention of changing his strategy, as he sought to eliminate as many unpredictable factors as possible. He intended to act without mistakes until they met Hyun Yu-jin. Arnold swore that he would destroy this monster today. Squad A1 reported a fork in the road ahead and decided to turn right. Squad B1 encountered the same situation and also chose the right path. The B3 team reported that their communications were unstable and would first fix it before continuing. Mission Control acknowledged the message. Arnold ordered the operator in the center to warn everyone to be especially careful, as the ventilation passages were very complex and confusing. Then Arnold noticed something strange. The B3 group's camera no longer moved, so he ordered the operator to check what had happened. Control attempted to contact B3, but there was no response. The operators tried to establish contact again. Eventually, the B3 unit's camera was working again. Mission Control instructed the B2 to wait for the B3, which was approaching from behind. The B2 acknowledged the order. The B3 and B2 were already very close to each other, while the B1 was moving in the opposite direction. Soon the B2 and B3 established contact, but immediately after that loud screams were heard. The control center asked B2 what had happened. He replied that it was a creature. After these words, the connection was lost. They then attempted to contact B3 as B2 was no longer responding. The creature grabbed B2, but nothing was visible on the screen, so the operator asked B3 to explain what was happening. B3 replied that he himself hadn't seen anything. It had appeared literally out of nowhere. Hearing this voice, both leaders became alarmed. They rushed to the operator in the control center, and he too panicked. Arnold was so shocked that he couldn't believe it. It all happened in literally 1 instant. He saw a soldier in a mid-level reinforced protective suit eliminated without the slightest resistance. Even a seasoned assassin would have had a hard time doing that. Then he realized he had made a grave mistake in thinking this creature was an ordinary wild animal. It turned out to be faster and far more dangerous than he had imagined. He ordered that the order be conveyed to all soldiers, open fire at the slightest suspicious movement. He then ordered B3 to link up with B1 and together begin searching for the missing B2. The order was transmitted to B3 and B1. Arnold already guessed that they would be destroyed. B3 and B1 were heading towards each other and would soon meet at a fork. B1 reported hearing some kind of sound. Mission Control asked what exactly he was hearing. He replied that he was not sure because he was right at the crossroads of passages. A moment later, B1 clarified that everything was fine, it was just B3 since he'd heard his voice. Arnold breathed a sigh of relief. The others also felt relieved. Mission Control ordered B1 to link up with B3 and continue the mission. They waited for a response from the B1, but there was silence on the air. Finally, he reported that the B3 had been stolen by the enemy. Arnold was stunned. He jumped out of his seat, snatched the headset from the operator, and demanded that B1 explain the situation immediately. B1 replied that he couldn't report right away because everything happened too quickly. These words angered Arnold so much that his veins almost burst from the tension. His shout attracted the attention of everyone present. He asked how B1 could have failed to notice when B3 was standing right in front of him. B1 merely apologized. Arnold threw the headset on the floor in anger. It made no sense to him. The B1 was right there, and yet he didn't understand anything. He also noticed that neither B1 nor B3 appeared on camera. He began to wonder how these soldiers could have managed to keep the monster out of the video, and suddenly an idea struck him. He grabbed the headphones again, introduced himself as the mission commander, and ordered the B1 to state his name and rank. He demanded that it be done immediately. The captain next to him was clearly stunned by what was happening. In response, Arnold heard a mocking voice. "You found me out." On screen, the camera captured the monster's limb hitting the lens. Then sounds were heard as if the creature was devouring its prey. This continued until the connection was finally broken. Squad A1 asked what was going on. They demanded an answer from the control center, but Arnold was beside himself with rage. Meanwhile, the amorphous creature had already dealt with the entire B squad. The idea came to him after a conversation with number 26. He decided to intercept the radio signals via wave transmission. Thanks to the waves it emitted, the B3 radio began to pick up strong interference. Due to interference, B3 fell behind the others to repair equipment. At that moment, the amorphous creature neutralized them with a neurotoxin, a newly fused ability. After that, everything went much easier, and he calmly set about his prey. His next target was Squad A. He used his super senses and quickly located them. They moved extremely cautiously and warily, which was quite expected since the previous group knew nothing about him. Now the others already understood that he was able to imitate human voices. Amorph decided to use this knowledge against them. He reached the fork and expected that Squad A would soon be there. While he was waiting, a thought occurred to him. Is it true that knowledge is power? Because sometimes knowing only a small part of the truth can be the most dangerous thing. Squad A1 turned on their searchlights. They reported they had reached the intersection and were about to turn right. Mission Control confirmed the report. The commander again reminded everyone that the creature was capable of imitating human voices and ordered them to open fire immediately if they heard anyone speaking. Suddenly a voice was heard asking for help, and the soldiers immediately opened fire. They fired without hesitation. Then they saw the monster cross the passage. So they ceased fire. Control ordered A1 to check the enemy's status. A1 confirmed the order and the others were told to remain in position and provide cover. However, they were unaware that the monster was already behind them. Amorphous had grabbed the head of the last soldier. A3 screamed. The others asked what happened. A3 reported that the enemy was behind them. A1 and A2 were ordered to open fire immediately. However, they didn't fire because the creature was holding A3 as a shield. If they opened fire, he could be killed. But Arnold demanded they fire. He again ordered A1 to open fire immediately. A1 hesitated but still obeyed. He opened fire and the monster instantly disappeared. Several bullets still hit the monster. So he quickly jumped out of the line of fire. AA2 reported that they had one wounded. Control responded that there was no retreat. The creature had to be captured at any cost. AA3 began to choke on his own blood. AA1 and A2 attempted to render aid. Seeing that he was beginning to convulse, they prepared an injection of antidote. The drug was administered, and A1 reported that the treatment had been completed and they were continuing the mission. Control ordered them to move on. Arnold cursed and declared that he would personally tear off the monster's arms and legs. In response, the soldiers reported that the creature had also been injured, SBLs, because his acidic blood was found on the trail. This surprised everyone. No one expected his blood to be acidic. No one understood what kind of creature they were facing. They followed the trail cautiously. The passage was very narrow, but they still advanced. A1 requested permission to administer enhancers to more effectively suppress the enemy. The commander approved it. After the injection, their eyes became bloodshot, and they fell to their knees for a moment and trembled. However, it soon became clear that their physical strength had increased significantly. They swore to kill this monster. Then they crouched down, noticing that drops of acidic blood melted the surface of the floor. AA1 reported a large hole in the ventilation, but no trace of the creature was visible nearby. The soldiers assumed the monster had moved further down the corridor. Control confirmed the report. The operators asked them to provide the exact location so they could check the adjacent corridors. Meanwhile, the soldiers themselves were unaware that the monster was already behind them. Amorph suddenly jumped. One of the soldiers turned around, hearing the noise. They opened fire on the creature, but it continued to rapidly approach. The monster grabbed the soldier by the head and slammed it hard onto the floor. This caught the attention of the second soldier. He screamed and opened fire on the monster. In response, the monster's tail lashed out at him. SDA. The sharp end of the tail pierced the soldier's hands, forcing him to stop shooting. The soldier rushed forward, trying to hit the monster with his fist. H screamed furiously, demanding that the monster die. However, his strike missed the target. He continued his pursuit, firing at the elusive creature. Hours. The soldier's rage only grew. Meanwhile, the amorphous creature moved rapidly through the ventilation shafts. The enemy turned out to be much stronger than he expected. Even with the enhancing drug, people usually didn't demonstrate such strength, so he decided to adjust his plan. It was no longer possible to deceive A1, so the Amorph began to look for another way. At that moment, he remembered one possibility and realized that he had an alternative option. AA3 was still lying in the passage, slowly dying and writhing in unbearable pain. He heard footsteps. A monster emerged from the right corridor. The soldier screamed as he saw the creature rapidly approaching. A horror paralyzed him. He screamed, but couldn't even try to crawl away. The monster came very close, looming over its helpless victim. The protagonist grabbed him and stabbed him in the back. HD, all forward. The soldier screamed even louder from the sharp pain. Then the monster began to devour him, greedily tearing at his flesh, and blood flew in all directions. After some time, he felt full. He threw away the gnawed skeleton. It will now be clear to everyone that the A3 was attacked. He noticed a camera mounted on the helmet. He crushed it with his foot, and the control center lost the feed. The control room immediately announced that the A3 had been attacked. A1 rushed forward, breathing heavily. Despite the blood all around him, he called out to A3, asking if he was okay. He approached and demanded that he answer. The soldier quickly took out the drug, preparing to administer the medicine, but suddenly a tail burst out of A3's body and attacked A1. A1 was poisoned. He collapsed to the floor, screaming in pain, and blood gushed from A3's stomach as a monster limb emerged from within. A1 couldn't understand what was happening. It turned out the protagonist had hidden inside the suit. He slowly emerged from his body. What he saw made A1 tremble, and the monster growled softly. A1 screamed and tried to crawl away, but the monster grabbed his head. Amorph removed his helmet and squeezed his throat. He deliberately looked him straight in the eye and announced that he was going to eat him. Then the amorphous creature sank its teeth into the man, and the soldier's eyes rolled back in his head. Amorph jerked his head away from his body, completely decapitating him. Then he began to devour the head. Although no sound came from the communication device, the amorphous creature sensed the people's fear. They watched as he devoured the A1. Everyone turned pale and panicked, even Arnold. With this act, the amorphous creature made it clear that danger lurked not only in the ventilation. People sensed that they themselves could be the next victims. Amorph waited with curiosity to see what plan the enemy would come up with next. 6 men had already died, but there were still about 90 soldiers, including officers, left on the ship. After such a warning, he expected them to attack him with all their might. He knew the ship was short on power suits, but the real problem was their weapons. If they had plasma weapons, he would no longer be safe. X-plasma cannons possess immense firepower and are commonly used in space battles. They are used to destroy ships and heavy equipment. However, such installations are generally too heavy and bulky for one person to carry. Lighter versions exist, but they are extremely expensive. Mock relatively light plasma launchers are sometimes issued to each squad by the Megacobe Corporation. However, judging by the supplies on this ship, the Amorph doubted that such a weapon existed here at all. At that moment, he noticed movement below. The soldiers were heading toward the agricultural sector. They seemed to think he was preparing to take cover there. He realized this was his chance. While the soldiers were searching the wrong part of the ship, he could tackle the top brass. Eliminating the leaders would disrupt the entire chain of command. First of all, he intended to kill Arnold because the very fact of his existence posed a threat. Meanwhile, the soldiers asked the head of the crisis department where this monster came from and what it was. Arnold replied to the captain that the supply chief had an unregistered creature, and it was this creature that was likely the monster they were now facing. The captain was indignant. They had already allowed the soldiers to use the commander's power suits, but still hadn't made any progress. Amorphous, meanwhile, listened to their conversation. Testa power suits are a person's primary protection in space. They should have invested more in them. Their attempt to save money could now cost them their lives. Arnold replied that this wouldn't have happened if they had better equipment. He also corrected the captain, stating that progress was indeed being made. The captain visibly flinched at his words. Arnold said they now knew the most important thing. Their enemy was an extremely dangerous creature with extraordinary intelligence that devoured people. The captain responded with irritation. Arnold explained that in combat, gathering information is vital, and one has to act on even the little bits of data one manages to obtain. Arnold then informed the captain that he had one more request. The captain frowned, but still asked what it was. The captain was surprised when Arnold asked permission to use the plasma launcher from the armory. He was immediately objected. This weapon was planned to be used against pirates, and, moreover, its use on board a ship is extremely dangerous. The ship had once been a combat vessel, but using such weapons inside would be sheer suicide. For the Amorphous, this confirmed his suspicions. They did indeed have plasma weapons. While the enemies were in confusion, he decided to take advantage of the moment to attack. However, his main target, Arnold, was too far away. The closest one was the researcher. It was Dr. Wei, the same one who constantly tormented number 26. Amorph immediately made him his target. Especially since I had been planning to deal with this man for a long time. Broke the cover of the ventilation grill. The noise caught Arnold's attention. The Amorph jumped right above Dr. Wei, its mouth wide open. His jaws were rapidly approaching the researcher's face. The moment he touched the floor, he sank his teeth into Dr. Wei's face. The rest of the people watched in horror as he devoured the man. Seeing that the monster was chasing them, everyone started running in panic, screaming in horror. The head of security was bitten. Another researcher was struck by a blow. The rest of the people rushed to the exit. Arnold ordered the soldier at the control panel to alert the entire ship's crew. The operator confirmed the order. But as soon as the soldier opened his mouth to convey a message to all units, the monster pierced him right through the mouth. Blood gushed from the wound, and the soldier died instantly. They opened fire on the monster. Arnold did it. Amorph expected him to run, but he had the courage to stay even without a power suit. However, ordinary weapons couldn't even scratch the monster. This made the amorphous creature wonder what this man was counting on. He was about to attack, but suddenly had a vision. If he attacked Arnold, he would have time to shoot. The Amorphous would be able to wound him, but Arnold's last shot would be fatal. This greatly surprised the Amorph. Arnold ended up with a plasma pistol. Such weapons are very expensive, but they are deadly and easy to use. If a shot hits the head or chest, the amorphous creature can die instantly or be seriously injured. Amorph felt that this man was connected to the Eugene family. Arnold also noticed the Amorphous's strange reaction. He realized the monster had realized everything. Then he tossed aside his regular pistol and pulled another weapon from under his coat. It was a plasma pistol. The captain was astonished to see it, as such a weapon costs a fortune. Arnold said that he didn't know this monster, but it reminded him of a certain person. The creature has too many abilities similar to those of its owner, Si Huan Yujin. Arnold fired his plasma pistol. The shot was accompanied by a deafening sound, and it turned out to be effective. The monster was forced to retreat. Arnold stated that he would eliminate all variables until one specific person arrived. Amorph realized the situation was extremely dire. This was the most serious crisis since he'd been born in the cargo bay. However, in the game he had already found himself in much more difficult situations, and he, the amorphous one, had always emerged victorious. Each of whoever arrives, whether Arnold's master or someone else, they will encounter both him and Arnold. In the media, predators like bears, lions, and wolves are often portrayed as the embodiment of fearless ferocity, but reality is different. True predators avoid fights that could result in serious losses. It is precisely this cautious cowardice that makes a true hunter. The player controlling the amorphous creature in the game always kept this in mind. It is important to remember, even strong abilities and valuable information are worthless if you act carelessly. Amorph dodged the plasma shot. Cord. He used his super sense because he already understood that Arnold was a dangerous opponent. Using this sense, he determined that Arnold's heartbeat remained steady. This meant that up until this point, he had only been feigning nervousness. Amorph assumed that Arnold had already analyzed it and guessed the existence of some kind of biological radar. Honest Amorph recognized that the man had the same hunter's blood in him. Arnold was an experienced predator. Amorphous quickly darted to the side. The shot missed, but several more immediately followed. The captain reminded the head of the crisis department that they were in the control center, so they couldn't damage the equipment. For SD, Arnold just glanced at them and replied that he would take it into account. He fired another shot. Just as he was about to fire again, he suddenly stopped. The monster had hidden behind the equipment. XOTAS. This made Arnold angry. Enorf understood that he was simply trying to deceive him. Thanks to his super sense, the amorphous creature sensed that Arnold had secretly ordered the soldiers to gather all units in the control center. He realized that Arnold was stalling for time, and all the shooting was just needed to keep him here. Arnold deliberately kept the monster away from the captain and the leaders, while his men gathered to surround and capture it. Amorph admitted that Arnold had managed to deceive him, then the Amorph decided to end it before reinforcements arrived. He noticed a fire extinguisher and decided to use it. He pulled the pin, took a position, and pointed the nozzle directly at Arnold's face to block his view. Arnold immediately warned everyone that the monster was going to pull some kind of trick. He started firing at random. No one in the room could see anything anymore. Arnold sharply reprimanded the soldiers for using their weapons so ineptly. Someone asked where the monster had gone. Arnold already had a guess. He immediately ordered the soldiers to escort the captain out of the room. Amorph noticed how quickly Arnold grasped the situation. However, this was not at all part of his plan. He managed to poison someone else, after which he sank his teeth into it. One of the soldiers started looking for the captain. The captain replied that he was here. But then another voice intervened and told the soldier that the captain was not there because he was next to him on the other side. Arnold ordered everyone not to get confused, explaining that the monster was trying to confuse them. Meanwhile, the monster was chasing one of the people. It caught up with him and killed him instantly. Another man shouted that there was no point in listening to this nonsense, since the monster had already killed one of the managers. The soldier asked if the head of the navigation department was really speaking. Someone shouted at them not to be deceived, as the creature was simply imitating the leader's voice, XPA, but the navigational director insisted he was the one speaking. Arnold shouted for everyone to remain alert. It was the monster speaking. Arnold ordered to open fire on the creature, F. The soldier began shooting randomly. Suddenly, he heard someone groan. Hearing this, the soldier trembled. X's. The bullet hit Arnold. He turned around, sensing the presence of the monster behind him. Arnold fired. Amorph dodged the shot. He continued to move forward rapidly. The Amorph's back was torn apart. Anki and wings spread out from it. He rushed straight towards Arnold. His mouth was almost reaching Arnold's face. Arnold clearly saw sharp fangs. And the next moment, his head disappeared and blood gushed from his body. The headless body collapsed to the floor. The plasma pistol fell from his hand. The body lay in a pool of blood, and the monster stepped right into it. One of the soldiers aimed his weapon at the creature's dark silhouette. He suddenly noticed movement next to him, so what he saw left him speechless. Arnold's bloody head was clamped in the monster's mouth, and he pressed it right against the soldier's face. Then the monster calmly passed by. The soldier was so frightened that he couldn't even move. The monster climbed back into the ventilation shaft. Amorph would have liked to calmly enjoy his prey, but there was no time. His instincts insistently demanded that he leave immediately. The captain became furious and asked the soldiers why they had arrived so late. They could only apologize. The captain swore and ordered them to clear the premises. He was then informed that all the dead had already been accounted for. The report was made by the acting head of the medical department. The captain asked if there were any survivors. The acting head of medicine replied that everyone had died except the head of the research department. The captain was surprised to learn that the senior researcher was still alive. The medic reported that he was in the recovery room. He was incredibly lucky. He was resistant to the monster's neurotoxin, but he lost his sight, smell, and taste forever. Even if he survives, he will need constant care for the rest of his life. The acting head of the medical department, suggested the captain simply surrender to the space dogs. These words infuriated the captain. He responded sharply that he was speaking like a real egoist. After that, the captain turned and left. The medic tried to follow him, but the captain no longer wanted to listen to him. The captain wondered how many people they had already lost. The heads of the research, technical, medical, navigation, and crisis management departments, as well as the chief cook, were killed. He knew that in their condition they would not survive an encounter with the pirates. At one point, he even considered abandoning everything and simply running away. Then, one of the soldiers noticed something strange. One of the pistols looked different from the others. He said it looked like the weapon of one of the leaders. These words immediately caught the captain's attention. He ordered that this pistol be brought to him. The soldier handed over the weapon. After examining it, the captain saw that the charge was still at 60%. The casing was slightly damaged, but the pistol was still good for self-defense. Now the captain realized that he could no longer trust his protection to anyone but himself. He began listing the problems. The monster was still on the ship, and in 2 days they would be meeting with pirates. He sighed heavily, wondering what to do next. Meanwhile, the Amorphous One had already destroyed most of the leadership. He understood that the ship's AI would need time to fully analyze what had happened. Captain Yusung no longer seemed a serious threat, so he decided to expand his nest. He had 3 possible locations. Since one nest was already in the cooling chamber, he could create 2 more. The most important place was the dining room, because food is the key to survival. He planned to contaminate the food and thereby cut off the crew's access to food. The second target was the armory. That's where the plasma launcher was stored, and the amorphous creature had to do something before the humans used it against him. And finally, the laboratory. It contained various DNA samples and sonium, but the chance of extracting a useful property from these samples was less than 10%. However, sonium alone was enough to approach the power of a juvenile amorph. Then he could prepare to face pirates and any other enemies. Amorph made a decision. He would create nests in the dining room and laboratory and try to steal the plasma installation. He even thought about using this weapon, but then he remembered Arnold's words, that his master Si Hyun Yujin, whoever he was, might be joining forces with the pirates or even hiding among them under a false name. For the Amorphous, there was nothing more terrifying than an unknown enemy. Therefore, he needed to gather everything he could find useful. At that moment, number 26 greeted him. Amorph sensed that number 26 was in a good mood. He assumed that no experiments had been performed on him today. He asked number 26 if he was feeling okay. Number 26 replied that he was no longer in pain. Amorph realized that in such a situation, it was unlikely anyone would continue conducting experiments. Most likely, everyone had simply locked themselves in their rooms. Then, a bold idea came to him. The red alarm is already on. The emergency siren sounded. Number 26 asked the amorphous creature what he was doing. He replied that he was simply waiting. About 30 minutes passed, but no one showed up, which only confirmed the amorphous's guess. Now he no longer needed to hide. He removed the ventilation hatch cover. He greeted number 26, saying that it had been a long time since they last met. Amorph noticed that the creature's color had become brighter and looked healthier, but he knew that if he left it here, it would die of starvation sooner or later. He wondered if he should take number 26 with him. The bubble amoeba isn't particularly picky about food and is also resistant to neurotoxins. Therefore, it can be kept in a nest or taken with you anywhere. He asked if number 26 wanted to get out of here. Number 26 asked where exactly. Amorphous replied that he was simply from the lab. Number 26 happily agreed. Amorph warned him to be careful. Then he rushed towards the capsule, broke the glass, and pulled number 26 out. Number 26 jumped up and down joyfully, turning gratefully to the amorphous creature. Amorph told him to hold on tight. Number 26 asked what he was going to do. Amorph replied that he was making a nest. After this, he spat a stream of acid from his mouth. He covered the entire room in acid. The acid grew like vines, entangling the entire laboratory. After that, people would no longer be able to use the place. Feeling hungry, he realized he'd overdone it a bit. Then he grabbed the brain. He noticed it was still alive, but its taste was unpleasant. However, right now, getting nutrients was more important to him than enjoying the taste. Number 26 ate with him. Amorph noticed that number 26 enjoyed eating. Suddenly, the amorphous creature felt someone's presence. Someone was approaching. One of them was a soldier and the other was an explorer. There were only 2 of them, although even a whole squad would not have been able to cope with the amorphous. The door opened. The door opened, if the men froze at what they saw. The entire room was covered with acidic formations that looked like vines. The soldier moved closer to get a closer look. He didn't even notice that the monster was already standing behind him. Depuen, when he finally sensed danger, he immediately raised his weapon. As she started shooting as the monster rapidly approached him, he saw the monster's hand reaching towards his body. And the next moment he was pierced straight through the heart. Blood gushed from his mouth and tears streamed down his face. Soon, his body fell lifelessly to the floor. TD. The monster headed towards the researcher, and he immediately began to beg for mercy. The monster grabbed the man by the head. All but the amorphous creature was suddenly distracted when number 26 screamed, "It hurts." Number 26 jumped onto the amorphous's shoulder as if complaining about something. Amorph realized that this researcher was involved in experiments on the bubble amoeba, so number 26 probably got angry when he saw his tormentor. Amorph momentarily forgot that the bubble amoeba was also capable of killing. He pierced the man with his tail, which caused the researcher's body to instantly become paralyzed. He then passed number 26 straight to him. Number 26 jumped on the man's face as if he was going to eat him, and actually began to devour him. The creature completely covered the victim's face and slowly melted it. Watching this, the amorphous creature wondered who had it worse, the soldier who died instantly, or the researcher whose head slowly melted. However, he quickly dismissed these thoughts since both of them died anyway, which meant that the method of death no longer mattered. While he was devouring the brain, a system window appeared in front of him. He was lucky. The goal was achieved faster than he expected. The system asked if he wanted to unlock the physical strength boost. Ate over 500 different samples, but only achieved 3 characteristics. Nevertheless, he was pleased with what he had acquired. Taking number 26 with him, he headed back, intending to activate the new ability. He told number 26 that it wouldn't take long. He then confirmed the skill unlock, and his body made a loud cracking sound. His legs became significantly larger, and sharp spikes grew on his back. Number 26 was amazed at how huge he had become, and number 26 jumped up to him and happily noticed that he had become so big. Amorph replied that he had simply grown, but number 26 didn't understand the meaning of that word. Amorphous replied that he had grown from a young creature into an adult form. Number 26 asked if that meant he was once a child. After that, he called the Amorph a big child. Thinking about it from a biological point of view, the Amorph realized that it really wasn't fully formed yet, so this definition wasn't entirely wrong. He decided to explain this in more detail later when number 26 learned to speak more correctly. Amorph noticed his body had become heavier and much stronger. It felt as if the fast cheetah had transformed into a powerful rhinoceros. He also grew taller, and his arms and legs were now covered in strong armor. The legs had become much stronger and thicker due to improved physical strength. He checked his stats. He now had natural regeneration, bladed tentacles, and infection organs. Natural regeneration combined with increased vitality and developed into a fully functional regenerative capacity. All the stats look great except for the type penalty. Amorph has no limit to the number of types it can obtain. However, each new type doubles the requirements to obtain the next one. For example, if he chose the Super Ability Enhancement type first, the requirements to obtain the Physical Enhancement type would increase from 10 to 20. If it were just a game, he would have carefully chosen the moment to get the type. But in reality, he didn't have that luxury due to the looming threat. So he decided to hold off on unlocking the next type for now. It was more important to test the new abilities now. Previously, the durability of his blade tentacles was too weak. He hit the column with them, and realized that after receiving the physical enhancement, they had become much stronger. He then decided to check the infected organ. He released a stream of acid from the neck area. This ability allowed him to use some of his characteristics and even create spores that secrete a caustic acidic liquid. With such power, he can turn the entire ship into his fortress. It's the perfect ability for battling a powerful opponent. Having completed the check, he decided to move on. The number 26 called him Little One again and asked where he was going. Amorph replied that he was going to the hangar. Amorph was curious to see how the crew would react when they saw him now. He imagined people crying or rushing to the escape pods. He would soon see it for himself. People ran as fast as they could. They had to make it. The door couldn't stay open much longer. As soon as they ran inside, the door should have been immediately closed. But this did not happen because the man at the control panel was too scared to act. One of the men became angry and kicked the trembling soldier, pushing him aside. He quickly pulled the lever and the door began to slowly close. However, the monster's hands reached through the remaining gap. Amorphous threw the door open with force. He roared and the people screamed in horror. They cried out for help, but there was no escape. The monster quickly killed them all. Bloody hands left prints on the glass. Amorph continued to chew greedily, and the sound echoed throughout the ship. Meanwhile, in the other room, Dr. Wei's eyebrows twitched. He was in a capsule in the recovery room. He looked horrific. Half his face had been stripped of skin, revealing the muscles, one eye was tightly shut, and his entire body was covered in bruises. He tried to figure out what was happening because he couldn't hear any footsteps. His hands were shaking. He couldn't believe what was happening. He had lost a great deal of weight and couldn't understand what he had done to deserve such a fate. He felt it would be better to die than to live in such a state. Suddenly, he heard a loud bang. He thought it might be a soldier. He opened his eyes, but the socket was empty. However, the footsteps he heard seemed familiar. He realized that it was a monster, and that it had come specifically for him. The monster pressed some button, and he didn't understand what it was going to do. The next moment, he felt something soft and sticky on his head. Almost immediately, number 26 began to devour his head. As the flesh dissolved, it felt like his skull was on fire. He couldn't speak, but his mind was screaming desperately for someone to just kill him, until he began to choke on his own blood. 3 hours later, number 26 crawled out of the capsule. Amorph asked if he had finished eating, and number 26 replied that he had. Amorph asked how he felt after the revenge, but number 26 did not understand the meaning of this word. Then the amorphous creature explained that it was about him eating the man who was tormenting him. Number 26 simply replied that he was delicious. Amorph realized that number 26 didn't experience complex emotions like revenge. He wasn't sure if this was because the creature hadn't yet learned to feel such feelings, or if it was part of its nature. He was also alarmed by the researchers' interest in number 26. He hoped the bubble amoeba wouldn't turn into some kind of sea demon. The sea demon, like the bubble amoeba, inhabits only water planets. This creature reaches approximately 25 meters in length and conceals